Okay, today we're going to talk about photosynthesis. It's just going to be a very brief intro into it. We'll be going into it much more in depth in the next section. So make sure that you've read through 8.2 right now on photosynthesis and overview. If you have not read that yet, you need to stop right now, go read that part on your online book, and then come back. Okay, if you've already read it, make sure you have your notebook out, something to write with, and begin taking notes. All right, we're going to start off talking about chlorophyll and chloroplast. What role do pigments play in the process of photosynthesis? Photosynthetic organisms capture energy from sunlight with pigments. Light, this is the energy from the sun that travels to the earth in the form of light. Okay, kind of self-explanatory. Sunlight is a mixture of different wavelengths, many of which are visible to our eyes and make up the visible spectrum. So you're all familiar with this rainbow that we have here. So the different wavelengths going from violet all the way to reds. Light is what our eyes are able to see in the different wavelengths of the visible spectrum. And like we said, they're red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Pigments, this is what the plants have that gathers the sunlight and energy with light-absorbing molecules. Okay, those things are called pigments, and the plant's principal pigment is chlorophyll. Okay, so the pigments are used to gather the sun's energy by using, pigments are the light-absorbing molecules that the plant uses to gather the sun's energy. All right, so the main one is chlorophyll. The two types of chlorophyll found in plants, chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. These absorb light very well in the blue, violet, and the red regions of the visible spectrum, but not in the green regions. So if you look at the, the graphic below, you'll see chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, and the different wavelengths down at the bottom, and the estimated absorption. So how much of these can be absorbed by the plant. So chlorophyll A and B both absorb much more in the violet blue areas than they do in any other, but they absorb it more in the orange red than in the green or yellow, right? Leaves reflect green light, which is why plants look green. All right, plants also contain red and orange pigments such as keratin that absorbs light in other regions of the spectrum. Most of the time, the green color of the chlorophyll overwhelms the other pigments, but as temperatures drop and chlorophyll molecules break down, the red and orange pigments can also be seen. So we talked about this a little bit, I think, but the fact that all leaves, even though they look green, contain all of these chlorophyll colors, all these pigment colors, but you don't see them most of the time because the green ones, there's more of the green in there. And so it's not until if you live in a place where the temperatures change, if you have seasons, then when that begins to happen, the green chlorophyll breaks down and you're able to see the red and the orange and at times the yellow. All right, so chloroplast. Photosynthesis takes place inside organelles called chloroplast. And chloroplasts contain sac-like photosynthetic membranes called thylakoids. These are interconnected and arranged in stacks known as grana. So if you look at this picture here, okay, so we're breaking it down from the plant to the plant cell, okay, remember the cell wall here, okay, inside here are the chloroplast. You're going to need to become very familiar with this graphic of the chloroplast, okay, you have the chloroplast, it has an outer and an inner membrane, okay, the stroma is all of this extra space in here. The thylakoid would be this stack of things. The thylakoid membrane is the outer part of it, okay? The grana are what we call the individual stacks, Okay, become familiar with this. All right, pigments are located in the thylakoid membrane. The fluid portion outside of the thylakoid is known as the stroma. So, again, looking at it a little more closely, you have the outer membrane, the inner membrane, the stroma, which would be equivalent to the cytoplasm in a regular cell. Okay, so this open space is the stroma. The thylakoid, which is the stack of things, the thylakoid membrane, which is the outside, and the grana, the stacks. All right, energy collection. Because light is a form of energy, and any compound that absorbs Because light is a form of energy, any compound that absorbs light absorbs energy. So does that make sense? Light is energy, so if it absorbs light, it also absorbs energy. So chlorophyll absorbs visible light especially well, which means chlorophyll absorbs energy. When chlorophyll absorbs light, a large fraction of the light energy is transferred to electrons. These high energy electrons make photosynthesis work. This is going to be a common theme, that that high energy electrons transfer, high energy electrons being transferred is how energy gets made. And we'll see that a little bit more when we show making ATP or NADPH. So what are electron carrier molecules? They are compounds that can accept a pair of high energy electrons and then transfer them along with most of that energy to another molecule. Okay, so they take high energy electrons and then they give them to something else along with most of the energy. Okay. High energy electrons produced by chlorophyll are highly reactive and they require a special carrier. Okay, so think about high energy electrons this way, okay? Think about it being like a hot potato. If you wanted to move a potato from one place to another, you would use an oven mitt to carry it, right? You wouldn't pick up the hot potato with just your hand. So think of the oven mitt as the NADPH, the electron carrier. Okay, you have the two electrons are the potato, and then you have a hydrogen there that needs to bond. So when you pick up the potato with the hot mitt, with the oven mitt, that's the NADPH taking the electrons, carrying them, and then when it puts it down, that's the transfer of energy to something else. Okay, so plants use electron carriers to transport high energy electrons from chlorophyll to other molecules. NADPH and you always need to have the plus sign there. Okay, this is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. It's a carrier molecule and it's involved with photosynthesis. It accepts and holds two high energy electrons along with a hydrogen ion. In this way, it's converted to NADPH. So it's NADP until it takes on the electrons in the hydrogen ion, then it becomes NADPH. The NADPH can then carry the high energy electrons to a chemical reaction somewhere else in the cell. So, what are the reactants and products of photosynthesis? All right, photosynthesis uses energy of sunlight to convert water and carbon dioxide into high energy sugars and oxygen. So you have 6 carbon dioxides, 6 CO2, plus 6 waters, 6 H2Os. You add in light and you get this molecule, C6H12O6, this is glucose, plus you get 6 oxygen atoms. Now, oxygen is always going to be written as O2 when it's not connected with something else, because one oxygen atom can't be alone. It's not stable on its own. It always has to be with another oxygen atom. Okay, so carbon dioxide plus water gives you glucose and oxygen. Okay? Plants use the sugars generated by photosynthesis to produce complex carbohydrates such as starches and to provide energy for the synthesis of other compounds, including proteins and lipids. Photosynthesis also changes carbon dioxide into oxygen, which helps us. If they weren't doing that, then all the CO2 that we emit would just end up killing us. We need the plants to change that CO2 back to oxygen. All right, plants use the sugars generated by photosynthesis. Oh, I'm sorry, I just did that one. All right, so photosynthesis involves two sets of reactions. The first set of reactions is known as light-dependent reactions because they require the direct involvement of light and light-absorbing pigments. So on the left, you see the light-dependent reaction. You see the light coming in. You need to see that you need water, that it happens within the thylakoid, and you can see that oxygen is emitted at the end. Okay, so water coming in, oxygen going out, occurring in the thylakoid, but you have to have water. Okay, these are the light-dependent reactions. You give off NADPH and also ATP, and you take in ADP and NADP. Okay, so these are light-dependent. The light-dependent reactions use energy from sunlight to produce ATP and NADPH. These reactions take place within the thylakoid membrane. Water is required as a source of electrons and hydrogen ions, so oxygen is released as a byproduct. The whole point of needing the water is, remember we talked about in order to change the NADP to NADPH, you had to have a hydrogen. Well, that's where this comes from. Plants absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and complete the process of photosynthesis by producing sugars and other carbohydrates. Now, during the light-independent reactions, this does not mean it takes place in the dark or after nighttime, okay? It just means that it doesn't require light to do this part, okay? So during the light-independent reactions, ATP and NADPH molecules produced in the light-dependent reaction are used to produce high-energy sugars from carbon dioxide. So you take the NADPH that was formed. We go through some cycles, which we will get into in much more detail. You take in the CO2, and you're able to give out sugars. The entire light-independent reaction takes place in the stroma, in the empty space inside of the thylakoid. All right, no light is required to power the light-independent reactions, and the light-independent reaction takes place outside the thylakoid in the stroma. Okay, so it's outside the thylakoid in the empty space. All right, I'm going to show you this video that kind of just summarizes what we've talked about.
Today we are going to talk about an incredible process that uses light, carbon dioxide, and water to make something awesome that we all love, sugar. Unfortunately, we cannot do this amazing, incredible process, which is known as photosynthesis. Some types of protists can do photosynthesis. Some types of bacteria can. And of course, plants can. Plants will be our focus for this video clip. Animals and amoebas just sort of missed out on this ability. But we do benefit from it greatly, as this process also produces oxygen, the very gas that we need in order to breathe. So this process is important for us to understand. First, a little background. Plants and animals need sugar, specifically glucose. Plants, as well as animals, use glucose to make ATP energy in a process known as cellular respiration. ATP energy is critical for cells to be able to carry out their cellular activities. But while we have to be in search of food to get glucose, plants instead can do photosynthesis to make their own glucose. So that's kind of nice because they don't have to go anywhere to get it. Plants have adaptations to make them able to carry out photosynthesis in a variety of environments. Here is the formula for photosynthesis. On the left side of the formula, you will find the reactants. That means these are the inputs. The plant has to have these in order to do photosynthesis. On the right side of the formula, you will see the products. That means those are the items that are produced by the plant, the outputs. Now sometimes the formula is written a little differently. Technically, it needs to be balanced, and sometimes light is written on top of the arrow just to show that it's in the presence of light, so it may instead look like this. The C6H12O6, that product, it's a sugar, specifically glucose. Now, photosynthesis, it's not just a formula. Have you ever tried to capture light before? It's hard. Plants have light-capturing molecules called pigments that help them do this. See, visible light, it has different wavelengths. Different wavelengths of light have different colors. If you have ever played with a prism before, you may have been able to see how light can be divided up into a rainbow of colors due to these different wavelengths. Well, one pigment that plants use for photosynthesis is called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is an expert at absorbing red and blue light, but not so much green light. Because it does not absorb very much green light, it actually reflects green light. Therefore, many plants appear green to our eyes. There are more pigments besides chlorophyll that work with different wavelengths of light, and this can explain why green is not the only color that you see in plants. Chlorophyll is a pigment found in the chloroplast of plant cells. Convenient, they sound similar. This amazing organelle is not found in animal cells. There are two major reactions that occur in the chloroplast that, together, make up photosynthesis. The light-dependent reaction and the light-independent reaction. The light-independent reaction, by the way, is also called the Calvin cycle, or dark reaction. So let's talk about these two reactions. The light-dependent reaction happens in thylakoids. What are thylakoids? Well, there are little compartments in the chloroplast, and they contain the pigment. They tend to be nicely stacked. As a collective stack, we call it a granum. The best way to describe a granum is that it looks like a stack of green pancakes. Very, very small green pancakes. In the light-dependent reaction, light is converted by means of a complex process that involves multiple photosystems into chemical energy. By chemical energy, I mean ATP, we've mentioned that before, that's energy, and NADPH. We'll get to that later. During the light-dependent reaction, water, which is needed for this process to work, is split. That means if you think of the chemical formula for water, it's H2O, it is split so that you get electrons, protons, and oxygen. So oxygen is also a product of this reaction. So let's take a look at our formula to see what just happened. The light and the water on the reactant side were used in the light-dependent reaction, and the oxygen that was produced was also from this light-dependent reaction. Now, what about the other items in the formula? And why would you make this ATP and NADPH? What do they do? Where are they going to come in? Well, that's the next step, the light-independent reaction. The light-independent reaction also occurs in the chloroplast, but the name is misleading. It doesn't happen in the dark. It needs items from the light-dependent reaction, so they happen at the same time. Now, while it still happens in the chloroplast, as with plants, we're not going to be getting out of the chloroplast with this part, it does not happen in the thylakoids. Instead, it happens in the stroma, and the stroma is a fluid outside of the thylakoid. In this reaction, carbon dioxide must be fixed. What do I mean by fixed? Well, nothing was wrong with it. By fixed, I mean that with the additional help of a major enzyme, the inorganic carbon dioxide is changed to a more usable organic form. The ATP from the light-dependent reaction helps supply energy, and the NADPH from the light-dependent reaction supplies reducing power. By that, I mean that it helps add high-energy electrons to this process. So, in a very complex series of pathways, the fixed carbon dioxide, the ATP, and the NADPH are used to make a product that can ultimately be converted into glucose. Phew. So, let's take a look at this formula. Last time, I promise. So, we have here the circled items already that came from the light-dependent reaction. Now notice the other items, the carbon dioxide on the reactant side, and the glucose, which was on the product side. Those were from the light-independent reaction. Together, the light-dependent reaction and the light-independent reaction, which happen simultaneously, create the glucose that plants need to survive. The process of photosynthesis is necessary for plants to make sugar. Photosynthesis also supplies organisms with the oxygen they need because, remember, oxygen was a product. Also, since plants are the producers in food webs, photosynthesis is important because plants supply the energy for a lot of hungry consumers. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
Okay, so that's the simple overview of photosynthesis. I want you to make sure that you've taken good notes, that you've answered all the questions to this video, and be ready to talk about this when you come into class tomorrow. Don't forget tomorrow night, you need to read for the next section, and I'll see you in class.